While the shape modes in the Pathfinder panel are the functions that you use most often, there's also a second row that appears beneath it called Pathfinders. In fact, this one on the far left over here called Divide is used many times inside of Illustrator. So let's explore what some of these particular functions do. I'm actually going to go ahead and select all these right now, and you'll see that these are 4 distinct shapes that we've created. Think of them as 4 surfboards stuck in the sand. So I have them here, and maybe I want to be able to apply colors to the inside parts where they overlap. But of course, right now I only have 4 distinct shapes. You cannot fill these areas that are here. So what you can do is basically use this Pathfinder divide function that basically splits up all objects, how they overlap, into their own separate distinct shapes. So when I click on this right now, you'll see basically that I end up with a shape like this, and a shape like this, so on and so forth for all these shapes. And because now these shapes are all distinct objects, I have the ability to go ahead and fill these areas differently than some of the other areas as well. And again, depending on what my design needs are and how I'm working, basically think of the divide filter as a way that just chops up all the overlapping pieces so that they all become their own pieces on their own, or you could fill them and treat them as such. I'm going to press undo a few times to get back to my original here. Now let's explore the next option here. This one here is called Trim. What Trim does when I click on this is that you'll see that basically all the overlapping areas were removed completely. As you can see now, the parts that were behind this other surfboard here are now no longer here. I'm going to press undo to get all those back together. And you'll also notice that when I use the trim command, the stroke disappears on the particular object. The other function here called merge basically puts them all together into one shape. It's very similar in some levels to the Pathfinder unite command over here. However, it also kind of trashes the stroke command here as well. So that's another difference that you have there. Then you take a look at this one over here called crop. What crop does, it allows you to define any other shape and then have all these shapes basically fit in within that shape. So just as an example, if I were to take, let's say, this rectangle tool and draw a shape just like this. Since that's now the topmost object, if I were to now select all these and then choose the crop command, I'm basically only left with the shapes that would appear inside of that particular rectangle. Anything on the outside is gone, and the shapes that are here are the same thing that I would get if I had done the same command over here, which is the trim command. So I'm going to go ahead here and press undo one more time. Let's get rid of that rectangle. There's another function here if I choose to select all these here, which is called the outline command. When I choose outline, it's actually pretty interesting. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and just press the D key for default. It's actually a pretty important key inside of Illustrator to know. It sets all your objects to a white fill and a black stroke. But take a look at what happened here. It looks like that it does something almost similar to what I had before when I used the divide command. But when I click on these, you'll see that these are actually all now just strokes themselves. And you see how it kind of did more than just divide. It actually kind of broke them all to distinct paths on their own. It does add a lot of anchor points that are there, which I think are a little bit too much, that although we'll see later on in this chapter how to actually reduce the number of points on a path. I'm just going to press undo to go back again to my original. I love the fact that you have unlimited undos inside of Illustrator. Just keep stepping back as you need to. So the last one over here is called minus back. So remember this one over here with the minus front. So if I took, let's say, these two shapes right now, so what would happen is that the front one would get subtracted from that. Well, to the add one, I would do the minus front there, and then the front object disappears and it basically chops away the one behind it. But if I wanted that this piece now should remove this part from over here, from this particular overlapping area, doing minus back would have that particular functionality. So, I mean, it just saves me a step. Normally, if I wanted that, I would have to take this object, bring that to the front, and I use the keyboard shortcut for that, by the way. It's Command-Shift, and then use the open or close bracket key sent to the back of the front. If you're on a PC, that'll be Control-Shift. And again, you can bring objects to the front and back that way. So instead of me having to manually bring it to the front and then do a subtract or a minus front, I just simply chose to do minus back. And again, that's another function that's there. So just one thing to point out as you're using Pathfinder, this is more of an advanced kind of thing, but you may trip upon this at some time. If you go to the flyout menu of the Pathfinder panel, there's a setting here called Pathfinder Options, and there's a value for precision. Imagine you have very, very complex artwork with lots of points. Well, Pathfinder commands could actually result in taking a long time to figure that out. So what Illustrator does, it has a little precision level. And if you find sometimes where you're using Pathfinder for some commands and you're not really happy with the results, the paths don't look as perfect or as clean, maybe come here and adjust the precision a little bit, and you may get a little bit of a hit in performance, but at least you'll get a better result. But I find for the most part, though, you can leave this alone, but I just pointed out in case anything like that happens. By the way, I mentioned before that there were some extra points. There is a setting here called Remove Redundant Points. This doesn't actually reduce the number of points that Pathfinder uses, only if for some reason there are two shapes that overlap, and those shapes have paths that overlap each other, or anchor points that overlap each other, it will remove those redundant points, because obviously you don't need two anchor points stacked right on top of each other. So it will do that. So then again, that can just save you an extra few steps if you wanted to do that. Other than that, that is basically the level of functionality you have for the Pathfinders that appear inside of the Pathfinder panel.